This conference will now be recorded.
To order. Thank you. We are, as we just heard, we are being recorded, audio recording here. On the meeting at this point, myself, Chair TJ Johnson, we have Supervisor Doug Rushton and Supervisor Betsy DeBreda. We have our Executive Director, Sarah Moorhead, our Administrative Assistant, Leah Kellogg, and looks like we have Gene Fike from the State Conservation Commission, and our legal counsel, Ben Cushman, and various members of the public who may or may not want to introduce themselves during public comment later on. I don't think I missed anyone, hopefully not. I would also ask that when you're not speaking, please keep your microphone muted. It minimizes the background sound and distraction in this virtual meeting here. So thank you. Next item on our agenda is agenda review. I have one change that has been requested by staff, which is to add consideration of the Zangle bulkhead removal project, resolution 2020-07. I propose that we add that as item 7A under governance, and then we renumber or re-letter the other two items there as 7B and 7C. Are there other changes to the agenda from either board or staff? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I will move to approve the agenda with that change, Mr. Chair.
Moved by Doug.
And
Is there a second?
I
Moved
second
by
the
Doug.
change.
Great. Moved by Doug, seconded by Betsy. We'll do our roll call vote as we have become accustomed to. Doug, how do you vote?
Aye.
Betsy?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. The agenda has been approved. Takes us to item 3 on the agenda, which is our consent agenda. 4 items on consent this evening. We have the minutes from our special meeting on May 14th, the May 28th board meeting minutes, we have the May financial report, and we have the Skookumchuck planning addendum from the State Conservation Commission. Is there a motion on our consent agenda?
I will move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Moved by Doug. Is there a second?
I will second that.
This is really easy with only 3 of us, isn't it? Moved by Doug, seconded by Betsy. All those in favor, or, sorry, I'll back up here. Roll call vote. Doug, how do you vote?
Aye.
Betsy?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Consent agenda has passed. Item 4 on our agenda here is public comment. This is an opportunity for any member of the public who has joined us tonight to talk with us for up to 3 minutes. Is there anyone that wishes to talk to the board this evening? Any member of the public?
Hi, my name is Ann Baxter. I'm actually not a member of the public, but I did want to introduce myself. I am working with the Department of Ecology in the Non-Point group, the Watershed Resources Unit. And a little bit about me is I spent like a decade working in marine microbes and toxins at the Northwest Fishery Science Center and with the Suquamish tribe. And yeah, I'm excited to listen to this conservation district meeting. And also a little tidbit about myself is I'm a small farmer in the Skagit Valley. Thanks.
Great, thank you, and welcome. Is there anyone else that wishes to address the board? Hearing none, I will close public comment, and we will move on to partner report. First up here is State Conservation Commission. Hello, Jean.
Hello, Mr. Hello. I just have a brief update, and then I'm happy to take any questions. We are all watching the budget with great interest, You've heard, of course, that the commission was requested to propose a 15% cut to operational dollars for the upcoming fiscal year. We were able to do that without directly impacting districts or having to impact staff, lay off staff, or furlough staff. We've been asked to offer the same cuts for the upcoming biennium for both years. So that's being worked on now. You may have seen information about furlough of state workers. That was required for cabinet agencies, of which the commission is not one. And at this time, the commission is taking the position that we have offered up additional savings in the current fiscal year, and that the savings to the budget from furloughing staff in the way that was suggested would be a pretty minimal cost savings given how small our staff is. And so the decision at this point has been to not do that right now. Of course, all of this could change completely if and when the legislature comes into special session. And so we just sort of wait and see how that goes. We are in the process of working on decision packages for the upcoming legislature for requests for funding for districts. Only one operations funding package is being prepared. It's for the Conservation Technical Assistance package, which is lumped together things like livestock TA, fields reduction, forest health, and engineering all in one. And the thinking right now is that will go forward at a much reduced request level, simply because to put in the normal level would be tone deaf in the current political environment and not get us very far. So the hope is that we can show that there's this huge need and then make a compelling argument that this small, immediately critical and timely in light of sort of food system disruptions and all the rest, that might get traction in the legislature. So that's the angle we're moving forward on right now. That might change as we learn more about the budget situation, where the governor's office and various legislators are on this, but that's the direction we're moving on currently. The capital budget is looking better than the operations budget, significantly better. And so I expect that those asks will be closer to what you have seen in previous biennia, but that's still being worked on. Are there any questions that I can answer for you?
Jean, this is Doug. Could you talk about Carol Smith, the executive director's decision that she's going to have to make on the 2 pilots for VSP?
Yes, I'm afraid I'm not very well versed in that. That's sort of a Bill Eller question. I'm happy to put information about that in my written follow-up report, though, if you'd like.
Would you like me to mention what Carol said at our board meeting for the WACD?
Great. Yeah, please do.
I mean, I think you writing it down would be better because we can memorialize it that way. There were 2 pilot areas for the voluntary stewardship program that didn't get really the full 5 years, and Carol's got to decide whether to give them the full 5 years, which is past the deadline, but makes sense, or and there was a lapse of funding during program development as well. So she's going to have to decide what to do with the recommendation from the advisory group with that. And she said she was going to make that decision this week sometime.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. And maybe, because I'm interested in that, Jean, if you could give us a little bit more detail on that in your written piece, particularly which areas those are that we're talking about, that could be helpful.
I'm happy to do that. Yep.
Thank you.
It's Chelan and Thurston counties.
Yeah, I guess we know now. Thank you, Doug.
Yeah, but I'm looking forward to Jean's. She's got way more detail, I'm sure.
Okay, great. Anything further, Jean?
No, sir, not unless there are questions.
Any further questions for Jean? Doesn't sound like it. Thank you. That takes us to the WACD and NACD updates. Doug provided written updates in our packet. Is there anything you want to add to that, Doug?
Yes. For the WACD, there was a 6/23 board meeting. That was day before yesterday, where WACD approved their budget, our budget. And also there was a draft completed of part of the strategic plan for mission, values, and priorities. And that's going to be some continued discussion. So stay tuned. And if you have ideas, let me know or go to the website and put them in there. So that's all on WACD. For NACD, I'd like to let you know that there's going to be an NACD, National Association of Conservation District Board meeting on the 20th of July. Second item for NACD is they're doing a poll currently to decide whether to have and where to have a Pacific region meeting. It'll be a virtual meeting, but they're trying to figure out when the best time is. And then the third item is the National Association of Conservation District Forestry Committee is having a virtual meeting on August 11th. And there'll be more information flowing on that. I'm personally really excited about that. I'm moderating a session on recruiting more women to be involved in forestry in CDs. You guys that know me know my background is in forestry, and I think this is going to be a good thing. You look at the complexion across the country of who's involved in CDs, and it's not very representative at this point. And that's my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Doug. I do have a question. You said that WACD approved the budget. How does the budget that was approved for the coming year compare to the budget of last year?
Just about the same. Probably, I don't remember the exact numbers, but something like $10,000 less. The Plant Materials Center, which is a subsidiary of WACD, did a little better, so that offsets some of the stuff. What the group is wrestling with now is they've got a whole bunch of money, like over $1 million in an account that's just kind of sitting there, and some of us would like to see that spent on training or upgrading the Plant Materials Center or some other functions, maybe subsidizing our annual meeting. To be determined.
Ah, sounds like it. Thank you. Any further questions for Doug?
I have one question, if I may.
Yes, Sarah.
I heard that Michael Crowder, who's our NACD president, and from here in Richland, Washington, was named or appointed to the EPA's Farm, Ranch, and Rural Committees Committee. Doug?
Yeah, who's speaking, please? Pardon?
Oh, go ahead. I had heard a news bit on that, and so that seems like an exciting opportunity.
Yeah, who's speaking?
That was Sarah, Doug.
Sarah.
Oh, geez, I didn't recognize your voice, Sarah, for crying out loud. Yeah, Michael Crowder is from the Benton district. Sarah who? From the Benton Franklin district down in the Tri-Cities, lives in West Richland and manages a wildlife area. He was appointed by, Welling, I think was the EPA director's name. It's basically what they call a FACA, Federal Advisory Committee, and he'll be giving advice on those particular topics that Sarah mentioned to the administrator of the EPA to help them guide things. And I think it's a good opportunity. He sent me an email on it. I was frankly told him I was really surprised because he doesn't have enough time to do other stuff normally anyway. So I was surprised that he took on another thing.
Okay, anything else for Doug? If not, we'll move on to the Department of Ecology report. Alina, hello Alina, do you have a report for us?
Hi, this is Elena, and Anne and I are planning to be the kind of point person to you as board members and to the Conservation District as a whole. We're excited to be here, and I would just like to tell you that there's no new ERTS complaints in Thurston County, but we are starting to roll out our field work as an agency as a whole. And with physical distancing, appropriate precautions, as well as coordinating that physical distancing protocol along with our partner agencies. Since Anne and I will be the point person for you all, I would be happy to take any questions you may have for procedures, and we were hoping to continue to attend these meetings as much as we can, especially since it is fairly easy to do so since everything is virtual at this time. Thank you. That is my report. I'm happy to be here.
Great. Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Lena? Okay. No questions. Thank you very much. That moves us on to item 6 on our agenda, continuity of operations during COVID-19. This is an action item to review and act on the return to work protocol that's been developed by Sarah. So Sarah, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, thank you. Let me pull that up here on the screen for you all so you can see that. Let's see, there we go. So again, this is a draft of our return to work protocol for TCD staff specifically, and really talking about operations for the work that we do on the ground and in the office. This was drafted utilizing the template that was put forth by the Washington State Conservation Commission, and includes localized information for our own health department here in Thurston County, and hyperlinks to that, as well as fits the physical workspace and type of business that we do more specifically, not being a large state agent or in a large state agency building. So it includes things like when multiple employees are on site, protocol for that. It includes all of our protocol for social distancing and sanitization for utilizing vehicles and performing field work. It also, in addition to having those really specific protocol, continues to include hyperlinks throughout to a lot of the sources of information and announcements and proclamations and laws that we're all monitoring right now as part of the work that we do, and to help guide and inform that. So it gives us the ability to remain a little bit adaptable and flexible to continue to meet those needs and those requirements, especially as we go through different phases of the Safe Start plan. So one specification is or clarification is this is protocol again for the staff, and it includes our field and office-based work in this. So this does not include any sort of protocol specifically for the board and public meetings here. So this has not changed as a document since you've seen it at the June work session. But I'm continuing to reach out to other districts as well and review their return to work protocol and see if there's always any additional ideas or thoughts or concerns that come up that we need to address and include.
Thank you, Sarah. Sarah and I had a conversation about this earlier today, and I had mentioned that there wasn't anything in here about the board and our board public meeting work. And I think both Sarah and I agree that it's probably a separate thing than this staff guidance. And that not having the board information here shouldn't hold us up from adopting this protocol for staff tonight. But the question I'd like to throw out to my board colleagues is, would we like to come up with a similar document that would be sort of the return to normalcy for the board in terms of our meetings and our interactions with the public?
Your turn to go first, Betsy.
Okay. Well, currently I am quite happy with our virtual meetings, and would be happy to continue them until we're further along. I see no, I don't feel like we've missed anything except the personal face-to-face, wonderfulness of it. But there are a lot of good things about it also, and I'm in no hurry. So I guess we could create the document for such time when it comes, but it won't be, by the time we decide to do it, it might be irrelevant.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I wasn't suggesting that we are immediately going to resume some sort of physical meetings like we've done in the past. But in the same way that Sarah has sort of worked on this staff document over the last couple of months, I was wondering if we should begin to work on a board type document for if and when, or when and if, we hit phase 4 and we move back into a sort of more normal type of operation. So I wasn't suggesting it should happen anytime soon necessarily, just for clarity.
This is Doug. I've got a couple of comments. I wrote at the top of the draft, we need the same thing for volunteers, not just board. I mean, the board, obviously, we're the front volunteers, but there are other volunteers too, and we need the same thing for the public. But I think, as you pointed out, TJ, that we can wait a little bit on that, and that's something we need, though. How we're going to work with people is crucial. We are a public agency. But I think it's a really good first cut on the stuff for the vehicles. On what to cleanse, I would add sun visors and hood latches. My assumption is that staff does check the oil once in a while.
So do you have specific language there that we can, oh, there we go. We got it on there. There is right on it.
Just sun visors and hood latch.
Okay, great. I think probably should capitalize hood for consistency.
Yeah. And I guess you could throw in the other stuff like the heater and the air conditioning knobs and all that stuff.
Well, it says console, isn't that part of that?
Yeah, that would cover the whole instrument panel, right?
Well, I've got a car that doesn't have a console in it. So I think more specific would be better because some of them have consoles, some of them don't. Anyway, I don't think that's a major deal. But I think we need to do it to do a similar document for volunteers / board members and also the public. And like Betsy, I think this is working pretty well.
Just to clarify on this document, the similar document for board, volunteers, and the public, Doug, is that something you're suggesting we should ask Sarah to work on, or is that something that maybe a board member should work on with Sarah? Did you have a thought on that?
I think somebody working with Sarah.
Okay.
Sarah's got lots to do. And I'm hoping that there may be some other districts or the commission might have something in hand already.
Okay.
Are you aware of anything, Gene?
Nothing yet for boards that I've seen. I think some districts are incorporating volunteers into their staff policies in a similar document to this. And then the public, that seems to come up around how field visits are done. So that's the only context I've seen that in.
Yeah.
So far.
Well, I'd heard that the commission was a little bit loath to give advice to districts because we're all different and we all are, separate entities and all that. So it kind of puts you in a predicament.
Okay, so I guess the first question here is, we'll back up here. Is there someone who wants to make a motion to approve this return to work protocol as amended by Doug?
Also move.
Moved by Doug. Is there a second?
I will second. I actually moved but forgot to unmute, so here I am.
Okay, moved by Doug, seconded by Betsy to approve the return to work protocol for TCD staff as amended here this evening. Doug, how do you vote?
Aye.
Betsy?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. So that document has been approved. Now, second question is there someone from the board that would volunteer to work with Sarah to come up with this parallel guidance document for board volunteers and the public?
I think we teach David not to miss meetings. We should make David that person. I'm joking. I'd be glad to work with Sarah on it if she will be okay with that, or if somebody else has got real urgency that they want to.
No, I do not. I don't know what my surgery is going to entail, so I'm going to not volunteer for that.
Okay, then you get it, Doug. So Doug and Sarah, you two can coordinate on that, and then at some point we'll see something back, maybe bring to a work session for the board to look at before we put it on a board meeting agenda for final approval.
That sounds good, and that assumes I can recognize Sarah's voice in the future.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you. I think that moves us on to item 7 on our agenda, 7A actually, which is the item that we added that Sarah had sent out earlier today on the Zangle Cove bulkhead removal resolution 2020-07. A little background on this, Sarah?
Yeah, thanks so much, TJ. So this resolution that you see here essentially refers to the attachment that was sent along with the resolution, which is a generated boilerplate agreement with the Washington State Recreation and Conservation Office. We're in the process of applying or submitting an application for funding to do a bulkhead removal project with some partners on Zangle Cove. I'll pull up the agreement from RCO. So this is on our letterhead with our signature block, essentially a resolution that says we will kind of comply with the roles and responsibilities that are set forth in the oops, let me unpause my screen, apologies, with their applicant resolution and authorization form. So included in that is, essentially how do we play together in the sandboxes as entities? What are our expectations? Should we be funded? It's just part of their standard process. It does authorize, here we go, sorry about that on the screen there. It does authorize myself to submit and Karen to submit the final grant application and administer the project should we be funded in a day-to-day scenario, which is part of our delegation of staff anyway. So reviewing this, I know that you guys have not had a lot of time. This is just part of their process to submit that application. Once we hear if we receive funding, there'll be a subsequent funding award and grant contract, similar to our McLean Fish Passage project, which also came from RCO.
Are there any quirks or red flags or caution flags or anything else regarding this? It looks pretty pro forma to me.
You're correct on that. It is just one of the step in the process. It is just their kind of standard agreement as part of submitting an application so that partners are aware of the process and responsibilities associated.
And this is a new requirement from the state that we haven't had to go through before, is that correct?
I don't remember us going through this applicant authorization resolution when we submitted our McLean project. So my sense is that it's a new agreement that we did not participate in the first time, but I could be misinformed on that. Doug, do you remember seeing this a couple of years ago when we submitted for our McLean Creek project?
Yeah, I think RCO is a little gun shy of the Thurston Conservation District based on recent past history, like a year and a half, 2 years ago and before. So that might be part of it. I think the other thing, and this isn't RCO related, but we've not done a whole lot of bulkhead projects. And I know as a former National Marine Fisheries Service fish biologist that the NIMS is really big on this sort of thing. So this could set us up for future projects too.
Absolutely. We're very excited.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Any further questions for Sarah? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve Resolution 2020-07.
I so move.
Moved by Betsy. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Doug. Betsy, how do you vote?
Vote aye.
Doug?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Resolution 2020-07 has been approved. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
That moves us to item B, the debrief of our work session. So for those of you that weren't at our work session, a little context here. One of the things that we have included in our strategic plan, which was recently adopted, was a vision for building a conservation and education center here in Thurston County over the next few years. And we've begun to budget some money and put some money aside in our annual budget for that conservation education center. So we invited Tom Salzer, the director of the Washington Association of Conservation Districts, to our last work session. Tom, I believe it was Clackamas Conservation District, built a conservation and education center when Tom was the executive director down there. So he shared with us his experience and cautions and lessons about building that center down in Oregon. And this evening, the idea was we would just take a couple of minutes to sort of debrief a little bit and share our takeaways from that conversation with Tom and try to figure out what our next steps might be in this conversation. So I think that's where things stand. And with that, I would open it up to board and staff to share reflections and feedback from the conversation with Tom. If any.
I am afraid my notes got left at my home, and so I will refrain from trying to pull that out of my brain right now.
Fair enough. Doug,
one of the things that struck me was this is a big, huge lift, but I think we need to start, but still keep our eyes open for other opportunities. I don't know of retrofitting or something, but you know it's going to be a heavy lift, and we got to start.
Yes, that. Are you done, Doug?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, that reminds me that yes, I'm really. I don't know. It seems like when I'm talking, am I interrupting someone? No. Okay. I would like to see us try to share a building of some sort with someone, or at least property, and really make the best use of this huge expenditure. I hope we aren't building a brand new building.
Yeah, and I think given the economic realities, both in terms of what Tom shared as well as some of my own experience with capital projects when I was on the Olympia City Council, I think new construction, new construction can be problematic, but retrofitting can also be problematic. The one big takeaway that I had was the importance of having someone who could be dedicated to moving this project forward in terms of some sort of a project manager, and ideally someone with some experience with capital projects. You know, it sort of struck, as Tom was describing how much time he spent on this project, and I was comparing that to the workload that our executive director already has. that wasn't lining up very well in my mind of being able to just say, okay, Sarah, everything you're doing now, do that plus do all of this other stuff. So as we start to think about how we want to move forward with this, I'd be interested in trying to figure out if we could bring in some sort of outside project management who could really be that connection point between the board, the staff, and everything that happens on the outside for any type of a development project.
I think that's a good idea. I think most of you know that my wife is a college professor and has been involved in some building stuff, and that's what they've done, is hire somebody specifically to do that job. And I think it's been beneficial.
When I was on the Olympia City Council, we had some big capital projects. We built the Hands-On Children's Museum. We built a new city hall. We did a complete rebuild of Percival Landing. And in all of those cases, we either took an existing staff person and said, okay, 100% of your time is now in this project, or we brought in an outside project manager, or a combination of those two things, so that we could really have someone focus on it and move it forward. So yeah, I think it makes sense.
I appreciate. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, jump in here, Sarah, and share your thoughts.
I appreciate that conversation about looking at current staff workload and experience in this project, in this process. I've talked to Tom several times, both before and after that presentation about this process, and there's certainly a lot of time intensive and very detailed project management that goes into that, as well as an expertise level that Tom brought to the table in terms of being able to manage that project. He had some awareness already and some experience with construction and building, and that was really useful, and certainly not in every night share with Tom. So having somebody who really does know what to look for, how to read plans, and really how to work in that realm, I think would be useful. I do want to share, before I share additional thoughts of my own, that even though David is not here this evening, he did share some thoughts with me, and I forwarded most of those on to the board already, but he does have a construction project management background, and has done that within the Nisqually tribe. He's gone from the initial, sort of planning and idea design phase all the way through construction and implementation. And so I think that while he is likely not to have the time as a volunteer to really be a day-to-day on the ground project manager, I think that his experience and his excitement, he was very passionate about this project and very inspired by all of the different community resources that having our own space could bring. He was very excited to be kind of champion, I think, this project moving forward. So we may want to continue to receive his feedback and interest level in maybe leading any sort of subcommittee efforts from the board level or something of the like, because he was very excited. So I just wanted to share that on David's behalf. On the staff side, and from my perspective, I would love to explore, as in addition to any next steps that the board identifies, what types of maybe creative financing and funding situations or scenarios that we can participate in. I think there's a lot of creativity we can have here. We've been approached years ago in the past by landowners who want to donate property that might or might not have infrastructure on it to retrofit. We've been asked by partners before about purchasing space or going in on buildings together or becoming part of different facilities that are on the docket for construction. So I think there's a variety of opportunity styles out there for the board to review and take a look at that I would love to present to the board and sort of see what fits the vision the best. And then definitely exploring what type of financing structures may be available to us and sort of what that threshold might look like so we can start to compare what opportunities may align with that financing. And then when I think once we have parameters to work in, we can start to build it.
Yeah, thank you. That reinforces some of what I was thinking, and I had read David's note about that, and I recall Tom saying that one of the important factors for them was having a point person from the board that he could work with directly to make quick decisions. So maybe we've already got that in terms of David, which would be great. In terms of sort of how we go from here to there, you know, we have a vision that we want this thing, but at this point we haven't really fleshed it out in terms of, well, how many meeting rooms do we have and how many staff do we expect to have over the next 20 years and what sort of equipment storage we're going to need. So it seems to me that our first step is to kind of refine the vision a little bit. And then once we've sort of figured out what it is we want, then to do some financial feasibility work on that. And certainly the financial feasibility work, I think that would lend itself very well to some outside consultation. The vision refinement piece, I think, could be done in-house or could be done with outside support. And the suggestion that I would make is that next month we are going to be doing our mid-year budget review. And during that time, I think we should try to figure out if we have some surplus or unallocated funding that we could redirect this year to help us move the visioning part of this forward and have something by sort of the end of the year that says this is what we're looking at so that next year, 2021, we could build into our budget appropriate resources for putting together or doing the financial feasibility and developing a financing package for it.
I think those are good ideas. We also have some stuff in line with that on the shelf already, you know, visioning type things, how many rooms and do we want demonstration areas and all that sort of thing. And we could use that as a starting point to maybe modify.
Yeah. And I think it would be really, I mean, if we move forward in that direction, I think it would be very helpful for Sarah to kind of do sort of a survey or something for the staff to figure out what they see their needs as being, both now and, you know, some period into the future, whatever we might determine that would be. Because staff are going to have a perspective on their needs. Board's going to have a perspective on our needs and community needs, potential partners, etc. So, but I do think that next month when we look at our budget, mid-year budget review would be a good time to figure out how much we can start to move into that direction, and that might help us figure out what sort of process we use to refine our vision.
Yep.
Anything further anyone wants to share on this topic? Okay, to be continued. Let's move then to item 7C, July work session topic list. We have a draft list here in front of us. And let's specifically add item C under number 5 for the mid-year budget review. Let's add Conservation Education Center funding so that we can spend a little time on that. My guess is, given that we're going to be digging into the budget, at the work session. We probably don't have a lot of time for other items to be added to this, but are there other things that folks think we need to put on the July work session agenda?
No, but this will be a good time to mention that I most likely will not be able to attend the 14th meeting.
Yes, we have heard that, and our thoughts will be with you.
Yeah, well, it's not a big deal. Maybe I'll surprise y'all, but
You're always welcome, Betsy.
thanks.
I did want to check in with the board to see if at any point, if you would like to resume the staff presentation now that all of our technology is up and virtual and well running. If at any point there's space on the work session meeting agendas for that, we're happy to do that virtually. This one is a hefty agenda item and you may not have time, but this meeting or in the future, we can be ready to resume those.
Betsy or Doug, do you want to see the
I
staff
certainly
presentation?
enjoy them and look forward to them resuming since I won't be at
I've
this
got an
meeting.
idea how to do those. I mean, the staff obviously knows how to do them, but we do recordings, and then we, give us a presentation, and then we put it on our website as an educational tool for the public and clients and whatnot. Not just something for the board, but something that we can use as an outreach tool.
That's a great idea.
I concur.
Absolutely. That sounds wonderful.
It would also, I'm under the impression, Doug, that you're not able to see the screen that Sarah's sharing with us. Is that true?
No, I can see it.
Oh, you are? Okay. At one
Yeah,
point,
I got the paper copy too. I would
Yeah.
point out that last month I got the agenda and the board packet like 3 days after the meeting. This one I got, a day before yesterday. So whatever adjustment we made was a good one.
I think it's the vicissitudes of the mail.
I suppose. Anyway, we've got electronic, so we're okay.
Yeah.
Great. So Sarah, it sounds like we are interested in resuming staff presentations, maybe not in July because we've got a lot with the budget review, but maybe in August. And we like this, Doug's idea, it sounds like, about doing these recorded so that we can share it with our community as well. So I think that's the direction we'd like to move in.
Sounds great. We'll be ready for August and ready to record and post that to our website. Thank you.
Great. Okay, anything further for our work session topic list for July? Not hearing anything. So we will go with this as our draft for now. Thank you. That then takes us to item 8, midterm elected seat appointment interviews. So this is going to be an interesting experience. I don't know how many of you have done online interviews before, but it's a new one for me. The process here is going to be that we're going to interview our candidate, Helen Wheatley, here in the public meeting. And at the conclusion of the interview, which might last up to 30 minutes or maybe less, we will then, we being the board and the executive director and our council, we will go to a separate meeting room on Zoom for an executive session to deliberate on the interview. Then we will come back into this meeting room, this public meeting room, to take any actions, to report out from the executive session and take any actions that the board chooses to take. So that's our process here. So everybody is welcome. Everybody who's here is welcome for this part, and a select few of us will flee to another room after a little while here. The first order of business, and I'm sorry we're not a little bit more organized on this, but for my board colleagues, we received some draft interview questions a little while ago, and there are 8 questions on this list, and without saying the questions, just referring to the numbers of the questions, are there any that you would like to strike, or do you prefer to use all 8 of these questions? And I'll ask you first, Betsy, and then you, Doug. Are you there, Betsy?
Hello?
Hello,
Sorry.
Betsy, are you there?
Hello? Okay.
Okay.
I'll start over. I don't have the list in front of me, I'm afraid, because I don't have the printed packet because I'm away. But number 1, 4, and 6 seemed important to me, and I don't have the list of some that seemed redundant or
Okay.
very similar. So I don't think we need to ask all of the questions.
Okay, so we will definitely put 1, 4, and 6 on our interview list. Doug, what do you think?
I was okay with all of them.
Okay. I don't think we need item 8 because that was pretty well covered on the candidate's resume and application letter. So I'm going to suggest we go with the seven questions in this interview, if that's okay with folks.
Sure. And I guess I would remind Helen, and I welcome you, Helen. I would like to just remind her that we have seen her application materials, so I think it's okay if she wants to assume we know what's on that and doesn't need, she can just touch on it briefly rather than completely restating every bit of it.
Yes, thank you. Okay, and while oftentimes in these sort of interviews we take turns asking questions, just because of the wonkiness of this technology, I'm going to ask all the questions and just try to keep our conversation with the candidate flowing here. So yeah, there we go. So with that, let's start in with the first question. Hi, Helen, are you ready?
Before we go, Mr. Chair.
If
yes,
you can hear
sorry.
me.
Hang on,
I'm going
to go Doug, and then we'll come back to Helen.
I'm sorry, Helen. I did eat pizza with you one time. I remember that. Could you, Mr. Chair, at the end of each question, ask if Betsy or I have any comments, because we may have something to add. But
Got it.
I'm fine with you doing all the questions, but just give us the opportunity.
Yes, sir. I will do that.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, then, question number 1, Helen. What would you like to accomplish as a conservation district supervisor?
Okay, well, that's a good question. Well, as I stated on my application, my primary concern in stepping forward is that I simply wanted to make sure that you had someone who has a degree of experience in this kind of board work. And, you know, my main goal is simply to support the conservation district in any way that I can as a board member. So as I said, I'm not really claiming to have a lot of experience in this kind of work yet. I hope I'm a quick learner. I suppose that a couple of, or at least one thing that I kind of imagine for the future is that I am quite interested and have been involved a bit in the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. And I can see certain areas where, as that rolls out, in terms of the kinds of programs that local governments want to take on, that there might be some ways that those programs or connections can be made with the conservation district. I do know that there's sort of a surprise, not a surprise to anybody who's on this board, but to the folks that were on the planning board for the climate plan. When they started out, they were thinking about it as being very kind of, one might almost say, mechanically connected to how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But they're evolving to a position of recognizing the importance of carbon sequestration. And in particular, tree conservation and also regenerative agriculture. And so I think there's a real good linkage there to the kinds of things that are done here. And you know, there might be some opportunity there that I would be interested in pursuing. So I guess that's kind of the main thing that I've been thinking about.
Great, thank you. Betsy or Doug, any follow-ups?
No, not for me.
Not for me.
Okay, we will move on to question 2 then. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing the conservation district right now, and why?
Well, I'll tell you. I am really concerned about the loss of land. I am quite aware, partly through my connections with Port Matters, that Thurston County is very much in the crosshairs of warehouse development. It's the land in Thurston County relative to the larger sort of Seattle-Tacoma megalopolis is cheap. And there's a lot of pressure to take advantage of that for commercial development. And that concerns me a great deal. I think there's a lot of pressure to take land out of resource purposes and put it into commercial development. And I'm not sure that that awareness about the pressure that's there is fully developed in the county. So I think that is going to prove to be a very big challenge for the county, is the increasing pressure on the resource lands to go into commercial use. I know a lot of people are very, very concerned about just population growth, and that certainly is an issue as well. But I think this commercial pressure is something that we're seeing now, and it's something to be concerned about. I hope that answered the question. I'm not sure it did. I forgot what the original question was, but
I think for me it answered the question, but I will
okay.
say, are there any follow-ups? Doug or Betsy?
I mean,
No follow-up.
I could go in another direction and talk about, you know, the watersheds or things like that, but that's just something that's been really in the forefront of my mind lately.
Doug,
I
did
think
you have
those
a
are real
follow-up?
issues.
Okay. And those other things might come up as we continue the conversation here. So we'll move to the third question. Could you describe work that you've done with agriculture, conservation, or natural resources? And we got some of it from your resume, but just a little bit more.
Yeah, well, I guess in terms of, sort of saying where the personal connection is, I grew up in, or at least for the first few years, I grew up in Happy Valley down in Oregon, which is kind of, I'm not sure if it's Clackamas County or Multnomah County, to be honest, but it's basically Clackamas. And so, I grew up in an area that was basically hayfields and orchards and pastures. So, I think that's my original connection to this whole issue. And it also was pretty rich in wetlands as well. So, so it's been kind of a lifelong passion in that sense. I have, as I put in the resume that I sent along in the questionnaire, it's certainly been an academic interest of mine. Like I said, I did my work on agriculture and sort of 20th century agriculture and irrigation and its impacts in different communities. So that's something that's been a concern. A little closer to home here in Thurston County, I'd say that my real involvement started when I got involved with the Capitol Lake issue and became a part of the Deschutes Estuary Restoration Group. And as I said in the resume, that kind of led me into learning more about the watersheds and the sort of structure of governance around that in the county and in the state. So that is another element. And I guess the third part is, as a historian, I also am interested in the history of Thurston County and have done some research on that. And, you know, Thurston County is kind of an unusual county for the fact that it's always been a county of small family farms. And it just has some unique aspects to it in that regard, in terms of the history of the state and some of the innovation that's come out of the county. So, you know, it's been an interest of mine, but it hasn't been what I've been sort of professionally linked to in recent years, because I've been more in education, and as I said in my resume, I've been working on the Hanford cleanup issues. So that certainly has a lot to do with land use. It's certainly very much connected to the tribes as well, but it isn't directly agriculture, I have to say, or conservation. There's some restoration there.
Great, thank you. Doug or Betsy, follow-ups?
No.
Nothing from me, thank you.
Look, Helen, the next question has to do kind of with time management.
I'm sorry?
It's sort of a long question, but the essence of it is that we have most of our meetings and trainings and things during regular business hours. So what sort of autonomy do you have over your calendar, and how would you accommodate the needs of the district responsibilities within the context of your other jobs or other life things?
Well, yeah, like I said in the packet, today actually was my last day on the Hanford Advisory Board. So so that job's done. And that's one where you actually have to be able to, well, not under our current circumstances, but I used to have to be able to actually drive out to the Tri-Cities quarterly for and I'd have to stay there for about 5 days while I was out there for meetings, and then quite often I'd also drive out for committee week. So you know, I have that flexibility. I can do that. There's nothing constraining me from working during the day.
Great, thank you. Follow-ups from Betsy or Doug?
5 days in Hanford, that sounds tough.
Yeah, you know, I loved the drive out there. I'd always go out on Highway 12. That was kind of its own reward.
Yeah, it is. It's great.
Yeah, you know.
I used to not like the Tri-Cities, but I had a bunch of meetings there last year, and it grows on you.
Yeah, it kind of does. Yeah.
Yeah, up to a point.
Yeah, and for me, I've been involved in it for so long. It was kind of like, you know, it was visiting friends every time I'd go out there. So, and I really love the contrast as well, just going over the mountains like that. I've always enjoyed Eastern Washington.
Great, thank you. We'll move to the next question, which is what specific skills do you think you bring to the Conservation District Board and organization? Yeah,
so again, like I said, you know, so I don't know how much I should repeat myself, but you know, I've over the years, I've been involved in a lot of organizations, and I do feel, and I've held officer positions in those organizations, and it's been everything from school kinds of things to political things to sort of more goal-oriented to, you know, doing this Hanford work. So I feel like I have a fairly broad range of experience with dealing with, and especially, and also with my teaching background too. You know, I'm certainly used to interfacing with the public. I'm used to talking to people with different kinds of expertise, both technical and otherwise. I think I'm a pretty quick study when it comes to technical matters, and I'm also pretty diligent. I think that one thing that I've come to realize is a value that I bring to organizations is my historical background makes me a real document-oriented person, and I really dig into documents and want to know the history and background and structure of things. And quite often that comes in very handy. So, so that's a kind of a diligence. That's my nerdly diligence side that I think contributes to any kind of an organization that I'm in. I think I have pretty good communication skills. I don't know. Yeah, I'll just leave it there, I guess, unless there's a further question about that.
That's you, Doug. Any further questions?
Have you had any dispute resolution training, mediation, negotiations?
I'm trying to think back to my academic history. I think probably I did back then, you know, some diversity training kind of stuff, but I can't say recently that I have, no.
Well, that actually kind of segues to our next question, so I'll go right into it, because the next question is, we'd like you to describe a situation where you were involved in a conflict and sort of what your role was in the conflict and what happened and how it was resolved.
Are we thinking personal like person-to-person conflict, or
any kind of conflict? I think we're just trying to get a sense of how you approach conflict in general.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm currently, I guess, involved in a bit of a conflict where, and it might tell you something about how I approach it, in that I am currently involved in trying to persuade the Port of Olympia to not yet sign a contract for a 200-acre parcel that they want to develop in the New Market area. And my concern with that was primarily that this was something that neither the city of Tumwater nor the folks in Tumwater seemed to be very tuned into. So I approached it by trying to learn what the history of the property was, what the city of Tumwater wanted to do with that property, what discussions the port had had about that particular property, and what their past plans had been for that. And I put together actually a little sort of a citizen's guide about that, and wrote a public comment about it that was educational about that background. And I also encouraged openness in the meeting process. I found that the port was not fully understanding how the Open Public Meetings Act worked, and so I'm trying to remember. I think I had previously been involved in talking about that and sending the information from the, oh, I remember what I did. I found the information from the Attorney General's office that sort of provided some guidelines under COVID, because I think what was going on was there were some misunderstandings about the guidelines under the emergency. And so with that, I was able to contribute to making sure that the OPMA was followed. And I was also able to assure that there was opportunity for public comment and involvement in that process. It's kind of an ongoing process right now. So, you know, I try to follow the guidelines and the rules for how the public can approach that. At the same time, I made sure that I contacted informally, or well, no, not I sent that information members of the Hemwater City Council who I felt might be interested in this issue. And so I went through the channels and did it appropriately. And, you know, it's kind of an issue that's still in play. And I don't know what the outcome will be, but I do know that I was able to make sure that the interested parties were made aware of the issue and had time to respond to it. And that's kind of what I figured my role was in that. So we'll see where it goes. I don't know. But that's my most recent experience.
Thank you. Doug or Betsy, any follow-up on that?
In adversarial relationships, how would the other side characterize you and your behavior in those situations? How would they view you? How do they view you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think, you know, my work on the Hanford Advisory Board is probably a good place to talk about that, because that's a FACA board, actually. Somebody mentioned FACA earlier. But it's also kind of more complex because it's also a tri-party agency memorandum of understanding created thing. So it has a lot of its own rules. But the whole point of the Hanford Advisory Board is that it brings everybody with an interest in Hanford together. And that certainly runs a full spectrum. And the thing about that board that I have really learned from is that it's a consensus board. So nothing goes forward if anybody on that board, and we're talking about probably 35 people representing a real, you know, everything from the TRIDEC to the tribes is on that board. And if you don't get everybody on the same page, the advice or the action doesn't go forward. So you have to have the respect of people that might disagree with you. And there was even, you know, especially in the earlier years, there was definitely a cultural component to that as well. You know, being a person from the West Side was an issue. And what you have to do is you have to be personable and social and, you know, connect with people at that personal level, and make sure that you have those channels of communication open. And you also have to be extremely rigorous about what you're doing and very focused on the project and where you want to go together. And if you can do that, then you can often find a lot more grounds for consensus than you thought that you had. So I've really learned a tremendous amount about that from working on the Hanford Advisory Board, because it's, you know, there's broad cultural variety. There are a lot of agendas there. I mean, people are put on that board because they have different agendas. That's the whole point. And then they have to get together and they have to talk and come up with results. And the thing about that board is it's very highly respected by all the agencies too, the Department of Energy, Ecology, and the EPA, because it does its work and it does it well. I think that's the key. Again, I don't know if I answered the question. I've wandered around so far that I don't even know what I'm talking about at this point. I hope I answered it.
Okay, I think you answered it. And we're going to move on. This has been a while, I know, but we have one more question for you here. And this is sort of, as you think about coming on to the board here, what do you think is going to be your biggest knowledge gap in taking on this role and working as a supervisor?
Yeah, well, I have been looking at all the, you know, I've been studying the website, sort of looking at the budget, looking at all the things that the conservation district does. And I think my biggest questions right now are about understanding the connection of the conservation district to the other agencies and the role of the staff in that. You know, sort of, you know, what staff does, how it parcels out its time to, you know, like shellfish or something like that. You know, I don't know I don't know all the players, I guess I would say. I don't know the structure of how all the agencies kind of interconnect and how that works. And so that would be the first thing that I would want to learn. I feel like in terms of having a kind of a basic grasp of the technical issues or the things that the conservation district is promoting and trying to do in those different areas, I feel like I have a fairly good understanding of that. I think it's more just having that knowledge of who the people are that are engaged, how they engage with each other, and the histories of that. Which, I mean, even just listening to today's meeting, there was a lot of that. There were a lot of assumptions about how things interconnected that I would have to learn.
Great, thank you. Any follow-up, Doug or Betsy?
None from me.
No.
Okay, then we have just a couple minutes left, and it's your turn, Helen. Do you have any specific questions for the board before we move into our executive session to deliberate?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my main question that I would like to hear from any of you about is how you perceive your role as a supervisor. What does that mean for you? Some boards you're really expected to go out and participate in a lot of sort of to represent on other committees, do committee work, sort of connect with other agencies or whatever. It's not clear to me whether that's something that is done so much, or on the other side of things, if this is a board where you're involved and engaged a lot directly in the things that the conservation district does. I mean, especially when it comes to the public outreach side of things. So, what is your experience? I mean, I guess for the three of you who are here in how you see, besides, coming to these meetings, what do you see as the stuff that you do as a supervisor to kind of represent the district?
Great, thank you. And Doug, since you are the longest tenured member of the board here, I'll let you go first if you want to respond to Helen's question.
Yeah, each of us has certain areas of expertise and experience and connections and all that. I've worked for 4 state agencies and 3 federal agencies, so I've got a ton of connections there, and it's all been in well, not all of it, most of it's been in Washington State, so I understand kind of what's going on across the state. And I do have an agriculture and forestry background and policy, and we kind of have divided up, depending on what our particular interests are, the various things. I think we're just kind of feeling some of that stuff out still, because as you're aware, a few months back, stuff wasn't so good, and I personally didn't want some board members talking to anybody. That's my personal opinion. But we all have interests. Like, I sit on a couple of forestry committees. I back up Sarah for the Puget Sound Caucus because I worked all over in Puget Sound. I've been kind of a liaison with ecology because of my former employer was there. So it really varies, and where the particular interest in. One of the reasons I originally got involved was to learn more on how to do stuff, what the CDs did. So that's been a pretty cool thing too.
Yeah.
Betsy, do you want to share your thoughts?
Sure. She asked a little bit about the division of labor, and I would say that so first of all, my background is farming. I've been involved a little bit with education and organic advisory board things, but mostly I've been a farmer. And so I'm particularly interested in representing farmers in agriculture and their needs. I'm also really excited about conserving and preserving natural resources living in Independence Valley. But being on this board has been a huge learning curve for me. I've only been on it a little over a year, and the staff does a lot of the heavy lifting. So we don't, I have yet to sit and spend a lot of time writing any kind of document. I think it's a question of whether you're interested in doing that or feel comfortable doing that. I'm not really involved with any other committees. But like, well, I don't need to speak for TJ, he can do that. So I think it really varies. Certainly I've been less involved in other agency stuff than anyone else on the board, but I've learned a ton and I really like the collaborative approach that we have, although it's not consensus. I don't think we've ever done anything but maybe have an abstention for technical reasons. So that's all I have to say.
Oh, I'm sorry, Betsy. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I just said that's all I have to say.
Okay. And I guess from my perspective, I think in terms of content, I bring the perspective of a small farmer and particularly a small urban farmer, and the perspective of somebody who has spent the last 30 plus years in one way or another working on the issue of climate change and believing that, well, maybe up until 3 months ago, I was absolutely certain it was the issue that was going to define the future. Now it's one of the issues that's defining the future, but certainly a big one. So I try to bring a perspective of moving this agency in the direction that will support local farms and a strong, resilient local food system and be able to help our community adapt to climate change and roll with whatever's going to come our way. I also just generally believe in the value of public service and stewardship, and I really, first and foremost, I see my role as making sure that public resources are well used and that we're accountable to the people that pay the bills and the community that supports us. And I like to be an ambassador for the district and to tell people in the community all the good things that are happening and the great staff people we have and what they're doing with their money and why it's a benefit and I guess PR and a bit of a salesman for the district. Particularly in light of what's happened the last couple of years, that's a story that needs to be told. And I think it's hard for the staff to tell that story. They have other responsibilities, and there's always some degree of skepticism when the staff is telling that story versus a board member who's just here as a volunteer because we really believe in what the district does and the value to the community. So like Betsy, I don't write detailed documents, but I try to do my homework and I provide good support and review and feedback to the professional staff. And when they need help making something happen to the extent that I can help make that happen, I'll try to do that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I guess, that's another thing maybe about what makes me tick, I have to say, is that sort of civil service ethic is very strongly ingrained. My father was a civil engineer with Multnomah County. He was a bridge engineer. He took care of the bridges of Portland. And I grew up with him perpetually worrying about them. And my mother was a nurse. So I do have to say, that's probably why I step into these things, is because I similarly feel that that these are things that need to be respected and appreciated and well run. Could I ask just one other real quick question?
Yeah, we have time for one more.
One more. Okay, so can you just fill me in a little bit on this Farm and Conservation Resource Center that you're talking about? Like, it sounds like that's a really major initiative for the board. Is this, how fleshed out is this idea?
It is a major initiative, and you're walking into this at the very early stages. in a nutshell, and I'll just try to give you a top level summary. The space we're in now is inadequate. We rent that space. There's a number of issues with it in terms of just being a good work environment, a good place to store our equipment, but also it's not a good place to engage the public. We have a tiny little meeting room. We don't have space to do workshops and demonstrations. And so having a space and potentially even having space on a working farm that would allow us to really show on the ground conservation practices and best practices in agriculture, and whether it's urban gardening or whatever, it would be a place that the community could look at and say, that's where I go to learn about that stuff, and it would be a resource for the community. We really this is the first year we've begun putting money aside in the budget for this. Last month was the first time we had any sort of real, somewhat deep thinking about it when we had the presentation from Tom Salzer. But we also know this is a long-term prospect. This isn't going to happen this year or next. This is, it's in our strategic plan for the next 5 years. That may even be optimistic, but that's the direction we're moving in. If that helps.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, can I add a couple of things?
Absolutely.
I think, Helen, one thing to keep in mind is if you read Chapter 8908 RCW, the supervisor roles, it's really, really open-ended. So whatever you're really interested in, you can almost work on anything. We try to stay focused, as TJ pointed out, on our strategic plan and do the stuff in there, but it's really open-ended. And I'll just have to put on my forester's hat here. There's a lot more going on besides agriculture, traditional agriculture. There's forestry, there's shellfish, there's the land use conversion that you mentioned. There's all kinds of stuff going on, and you can kind of cherry pick what you really like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thanks, Doug. Okay, so with that, I'm going to call this interview to a close. Our next step here for board executive director and council is Sarah has sent out a link to another room. We're going to close this meeting for about 10 to 15 minutes. Let's see, it's 6:57 now, so let's say we will reconvene in this room no later than 7:15. And so those of you on the public, that's kind of and Helen, that's kind of the time frame. We hope we should be back here in 10 or 15 minutes. And then we'll resume and take deliberation and action based on what we've just heard in our executive session. So with that, we're going to close this out. We're going to shift over to the other room, and we'll see board, staff, and council on the other side, and we'll see public in a few minutes.
This conference will now be recorded.
So with that, we are going to suspend discussion of item 10 until 7:15, and we will move to other reports at this point, item 11, and then we will come back to item 10 as our last item on the agenda. So we'll start, and I'm going to turn this over to the board. Well, I guess it's board reports first. So we'll just go around. Betsy, do you have a report?
I do not. I do not.
Okay, no report from Betsy. Doug, do you have a report?
No, nothing to add from WACD or NACD. I guess maybe I do, Mr. Chair. I also sit on the Washington Conservation Society, which is a 501c3 that we've gotten money through, I think. Is that correct, Sarah?
We have in years past.
Yeah. Anyway, they've got a function that they're calling leaving a legacy book. where people involved in CDs in Washington State are honored after they die. And I've submitted the stuff with Sarah's assistance for former Supervisor Harry Peterson, who lived out on Yelm Creek / the Nisqually River out in Yelm. He was a supervisor for, I don't know, about 10 years. So that's a first for Thurston CD to have someone in that.
Cool. Thank you. My report is an update on progress with the City of Olympia on preservation or mitigation of the farmland at the Zahn parcel off of Yelm Highway. The council member Madrone successfully got a referral from the city council to the land use committee to work on that issue. She had requested that the city authorize them to create a task force that would have included us, meaning the district, as well as folks from the Farmland Trust, etc. And they got nervous about calling it a task force. But nonetheless, the city council gave it to the land use committee and said, work with those folks to come up with a proposal for mitigation. So the last week or so, I've been talking with Danny, trying to figure out what our next steps are on that. And we just today nailed down a meeting for July 7th. The city, one of the holdups on the city side is they weren't sure who the staff person was going to be to support Councilmember Madrone on this. And they've now identified someone, and I don't know his exact title, but I think he's sort of like the Assistant Director of Community Planning and Development or something like that. So it's a fairly high-level staff person, which I think is good. He's a fellow that I worked with a little bit on another issue in the past couple of years, and was a relatively positive experience. So the city staff, Councilmember Madrone, Sarah and I, and then Marcy Cleaver and Patrick from the Land Trust will be meeting on the 7th. I think the next step is to review the data that our staff has compiled about farm and ag activity both in the city of Olympia and in the urban growth area, and then to sort of figure out what the next steps are. The timeline, I think at this point, is that that we would have some proposed mitigation policy back to the city of Olympia at some point in this calendar year. That's about as specific as we can be at this point. Be happy to answer any questions if folks have them. The takeaway should be that we're making progress and we're still moving forward on this.
Yeah, I got an idea, TJ. The Conservation Committee, excuse me, the WACD is looking for presentations at the annual meeting. This is really early and this isn't an offer, but it seems to me like there would be a lot of CDs around the state that would like to hear about this sort of thing, how to work with your local government on land use issues and to keep farmland and agricultural lands and forest lands and other working lands as they are.
That's actually a great idea, Doug. And that meeting's in December, right?
Early December, late November, right after Thanksgiving. I don't know the exact date. But we're having a meeting tomorrow, so if you're okay with it, I could bring that up.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning if they're interested, and if this mitigation policy comes to fruition and we make some progress on it, it would be a good story to share with other districts.
Okay, I'll bring it up with that caveat.
Cool. All right. Nothing further from me. That takes us to Executive Director report. And for those of you who are not on the board who just recently rejoined us on this call, just to clarify where we're at on the agenda, because we said we would be coming out to item 10, our executive session report out not later than 7:15, we decided to hold off until 7:15 to do that, or at least 7:15 to do that. So we bumped up other reports, and then we're going to go back and do item 10 as our last agenda item here in just a couple of minutes. So Sarah, ED report.
Thank you. A couple of items. The WACD conference planning committee met for the first time this morning, which you all know that I'm part of. There's a great group of folks from across the state, and I really think that we've got some great expertise and creativity to put together a pretty awesome virtual meeting this year. So I was really inspired by the opportunity that may arise from that. The structure, style, and content, as Doug just mentioned, is still really in the early works, but there's hope to have at least an outline of timing, days, presentations, and topics by September. So more to come on that. On our district finance front, as you guys know, we will be looking at our mid-year budget at the July work session, kind of reviewing where we're at in terms of implementing our annual budget, where we may have been spending faster or slower than anticipated, and might have adjustments that are recommended for consideration. And once we establish that, it'll be a quick turn around the door when we start having conversations about our 2021 budget. So that we'll start having conversation in September to get a draft of that budget put together for review in October. So as we're thinking about those things that will tie into next year or carry into next year, staff will be taking notes and putting those in a parking lot during July's discussion for items to rekindle for September. So in other news, we have a staff member who is going through the drone pilot certification training. The district owns a drone, and we need to have a certain license as a public entity to operate it. We are about to get underway in implementing some of our large projects, planting projects, restoration projects, construction of cost share. And this is a great communications tool that the district has. So we're really looking forward to being able to take a lot of great drone imagery and video of the whole development of our conservation projects from the ground up, and use that to communicate with the community about the work that we do. So that's something that's really exciting that I've been looking forward to for several years, and so that's going to be coming to fruition this year. Again, the possibilities with that are endless. We are connecting that right now with some story maps and some geospatial analysis to put together just more and more communications and outreach tools to share specifically the work that we do and what that looks like on the ground and the impact that it makes with the folks in our community. So that's really exciting. Lastly on the list is we sent out a survey to a target area within the Deschutes watershed that was identified by a committee of partners to do a needs and barriers assessment on riparian restoration, and essentially find those motivators and those incentives that are most important to landowners in our community to help inform programming, so that we can, as a community here in Thurston County, build those tools and resources that our existing programs and services between us and all of our partners may be lacking, or continue to fund additional opportunities where we may have services that are really successful, or identify communications gaps and outreach barriers. So the results of that survey came in with a 12% response rate, which is exciting. And I would love to bring that in as a future presentation to the board during the work session, because we learned a lot of really valuable information in that about our community. So that is my report. If there's any questions for me, I'll take them.
Well, that drone opens up all kinds of opportunities, I think. I've seen several presentations from David Marcel up in used to be Pend Oreille district manager. Just really great for explaining to people stuff. One of the things I think we need to think about is how to get the 3 entities that aren't part of the Thurston CD into the CD. I'm thinking of the 3 small towns. Just like maybe get that on one of our work sessions, develop some sort of approach.
I agree, Doug, and I would love to talk further about that with the board. We have positioned ourselves really well with some specific projects and done some review of some of those cities' comp plans where they've identified opportunities that involve the district, but yet there's not inclusion of them in the district in order to take advantage of our services. So we've got a lot there, and I'm really excited about resuming conversations with those city councils about that.
Yeah, I'd be glad to help with that too. I know you've been thinking about that a lot. What reminded me was at the last couple of Conservation Commission meetings, I think it was Pend Oreille County got Medellin Falls, for crying out loud. Who's ever heard of that place? They got them to be part of their district. Actually, my wife is from that area, so I'm actually familiar with it. But the point being that the ground has been plowed and we can plagiarize. I got no problems with plagiarizing what those guys did and how they approached it.
I look forward to hearing more.
It sounds like those are some good items to put on a future work session agenda, maybe together, the survey results and how we bring in some of the other members of the other jurisdictions within the watershed into the district. So that concludes your report, Sarah?
That concludes it. Thank you.
Okay. We'll then go back to item 10, executive session report out. I will report that the board met briefly in executive session to discuss the qualifications for our applicant to a vacant board position. And I would ask the board at this point if their desire to take action, or is there a motion before us?
I'll make the motion, Mr. Chair.
And your motion is what, Doug?
To appoint Helen Wheatley as the supervisor to fill the rest of the term of the currently vacant position.
I second that motion.
Okay. Any discussion before we vote? Anybody want to say anything about it?
The Federal Advisory Committees, particularly one as contentious as the Hanford one was, if somebody was appointed to that, that really speaks highly of how they're held in that particular community. I think it speaks well of Ms. Wheatley.
Betsy, anything to share?
Just that I'm very impressed and excited to move forward working with Helen, getting to know her attributes better and who she is as a person. Sort of, at a virtual meetings.
Well, and I would concur with all of what my colleagues just said. I think we've got a person with a great skill set, some things that some expertise that we don't currently have on the board, and I'm looking forward to working with her and helping her be a successful member of our board. So with that, we will call the vote. Doug, how do you vote on that motion?
Aye.
Betsy?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. So we've now appointed Helen Wheatley to be a board member. I will contact Helen at the conclusion of this meeting, because I don't think she's back on here, and let her know of our action, and then ask Sarah that you follow up with her to begin scheduling the normal orientation and introductory stuff, and to pull me in on that as needed to help you with that.
Will do. Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. And if I'm needed, I'd volunteer too.
Great. Thanks, Doug. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Moved by Betsy.
It's going to die for a lack of a second.
Now the chair will second it if he has to.
appreciate, TJ, how quickly you run these meetings and how you stay focused. And it's just, I go to a lot of meetings and some of them are bloody awful. These are not.
Thanks, Doug. That's my goal, is to not be bloody awful.
Here, here. You're more than
Well,
not bloody awful.
I would tell you if you were.
Can you hear me? Can anybody hear me?
Is that Helen?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
you know, I was waiting and waiting, and I tried to get back in again. And then I finally decided to just call because I didn't know.
You haven't missed everything because we're about ready to adjourn, but you did miss the fact that there was a unanimous vote to appoint you to fill the vacancy on the board. Congratulations.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
And
yeah, the odds were pretty tough there.
By you popping back in here, it saves me a phone call too, so thank you.
Yeah, there you go.
Sarah will get in touch with you to begin scheduling some orientation and introductory sessions to get you up to speed on things, and as well as giving you upcoming meeting dates, etc.
Right.
Okay. So I think we still have a motion on the floor that was made by Betsy and reluctantly seconded by Doug to adjourn. So Betsy, how do you vote on that motion?
I vote aye.
Doug?
Aye, and I'm glad you're on board, Helen.
Thank you.
Likewise.
Looking forward to working with you. I think it'll be uplifting compared to what I've been doing. So I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, and the chair, for the record, the chair votes aye on the adjourning motion as well. So our meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for a good meeting. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Sarah.